Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophets Joshua chapter 24 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We've actually reached a truly monumental moment in the text today. You see, Joshua is now an old man, well advanced in years. Think about it. He's literally the guy who led the Israelites into the Promised Land. He guided them through years of intense battles, and he successfully distributed the land among all the tribes. And now he is about to deliver his final, deeply dramatic ultimatum to the entire nation. It's a make-or-break moment that's going to define their entire future. It's going to force them to look back at exactly where they came from, just so they can decide exactly where they are going. So, let's dive right into this.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the gathering at Shechem. Then, we'll go through how Joshua recounts Israel's history. Third, we hit the ultimate choice. Fourth, we look at the stone of witness. And finally, we'll wrap up with some practical life lessons we can take away.
All right, section 1, the gathering at Shechem. Let's start right at verse 1 and set the scene for this incredible historical moment.
The text tells us right away that Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. Now, you might be wondering, why Shechem? Well, while the text doesn't explicitly give us a deep theological breakdown here, it deliberately grounds us in the literal geography, which is actually deeply significant. Shechem is this central, ancient city right in the land of Canaan. It's a place carrying profound historical gravity for the Israelites, tracing all the way back to their patriarchs. And it is right here, in this specific physical location, that Joshua calls the whole nation together to hear the words of the Lord.
Now, pay close attention to exactly who is present here. Verse 1 says Joshua summoned the elders, the leaders, the judges, and the officials of Israel. So he's gathering the entire chain of command, all the way from the highest tribal elders down to the local, on-the-ground judges and officers. And the text ends verse 1 with a very specific, incredibly powerful phrase. It says, "And they presented themselves before God." Just take a second to really imagine that scene. This wasn't just some casual town hall meeting or a political rally. No, this was a divine summons. The leadership of Israel is standing at absolute attention before the Creator, waiting for the final words of their earthly leader.
Moving on to section 2, recounting Israel's history. Once everyone is gathered and standing before God, Joshua begins to speak.
What's absolutely fascinating here is that Joshua doesn't start with a list of rules or commands for the future. Instead, he starts with the cold, hard evidence of the past. Speaking directly on behalf of God, he says, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says." And then he lays out an awe-inspiring timeline spanning verses 2 through 11. He methodically traces the history of God's deliverance step by single step. He kicks things off at the very beginning, pointing out that their forefathers, including Terah, the father of Abraham, lived beyond the river and actually worshipped other gods. It's a pretty humbling reminder of their origins, right? Then he walks them through the generations. He reminds them how God took Abraham from beyond the river and led him safely through Canaan, how he gave him Isaac, and to Isaac he gave Jacob and Esau. Now Esau received the hill country of Seir, but Jacob and his sons, they went down to Egypt. From there, Joshua reminds them of the great Exodus. God sent Moses and Aaron, he afflicted the Egyptians, and he brought the Israelites out. He recounts that terrifying chase to the Red Sea, how the Israelites cried out for help, and how God literally put darkness between them and the Egyptians, covering the pursuing army with the sea. Next, he mentions the long time they lived wandering in the desert. Then he brings them up to the battles east of the Jordan against the Amorites, reminding them how God gave the enemy right into their hands. He even throws in the story of Balak, the king of Moab, who tried to hire Balaam to curse Israel, but God wouldn't even listen to it, turning the curse into a blessing instead. Finally, he brings them right up to the present day, crossing the Jordan River and facing the citizens of Jericho, along with all those other Canaanite nations. Joshua is making absolutely sure they understand that at every single point on this timeline, it was God acting on their behalf.
As he starts wrapping up this big historical summary in verse 12, Joshua shares a really fascinating detail. He says, "Speaking for God, I sent the hornet ahead of you, which drove them out before you, also the 2 Amorite kings. You did not do it with your own sword and bow." Now, the simple meaning of this is profound. Whether this hornet was literally a massive swarm of stinging insects that caused sheer panic, or perhaps a metaphor for a divinely sent terror and dread that gripped the inhabitants of the land, the core message is exactly the same. Joshua is completely, utterly stripping away any pride the Israelites might be holding on to. He's looking at them and essentially saying, "Look at your swords, look at your bows. That is not what won these battles. God's direct intervention is what actually drove out the Amorite kings."
Let's move over to verse 13 and see how this builds, because it's beautiful. Because they didn't win the land by their own power,
look at what they inherited. God says, "So I gave you a land on which you did not toil and cities you did not build, and you live in them, and eat from vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant." Guys, these are pure, unearned blessings. The Israelites practically walked into fully developed infrastructure. They didn't have to break their backs clearing the rocks, or spend years laying city foundations, or wait decades for the olive trees to finally bear fruit. They were handed a thriving economy and a comfortable existence entirely by the grace of God. And Joshua sets all this historical and physical evidence squarely on the table for one very specific reason. He's forcing a decision.
And that brings us to Section 3, the ultimate choice, the absolute climax of the chapter.
Having laid out this completely irrefutable history of God's protection and provision, Joshua shifts the energy in the room entirely. He looks at the people and he challenges them to make a definitive, unwavering decision about their future. In verse 14 he says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord." He's setting up an incredibly stark contrast here. Over on one side we have the false gods, the idols their ancestors worshipped back in Mesopotamia, the gods of Egypt they were surrounded by for hundreds of years, and the local gods of the Amorites in the land they currently inhabit. On the other side is the Lord, the God of Israel. Joshua is flat out telling them they cannot stand in the middle anymore. You have to put away the past and the pagan culture around you. Sincerity and truth mean absolute exclusivity.
And then, right in verse 15, we get what is arguably one of the most famous declarations in all of the text. Joshua looks out at the whole assembly and says, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your forefathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Just try to hear that with the enthusiasm and raw conviction Joshua must have had. He literally draws a line in the sand. He is essentially telling them, look, I've presented the evidence, you have free will. Make your choice today. But know this, regardless of what the majority decides, regardless of what the rest of the nation does, my family's path is set. We choose God.
The people hear this incredibly passionate plea, and in verses 16 through 18, they respond immediately. They declare, "Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods." They actually take Joshua's history lesson and parrot it right back to him as their rationale. They say, "It was the Lord our God himself who brought us and our fathers up out of Egypt and performed those great signs. He protected us on our entire journey. We too will serve the Lord because he is our God." They are emphatically agreeing with him. They are 100% on board. It seems like a perfectly successful speech, right? Everyone's happy.
But then, in verse 19, Joshua does something absolutely shocking. The people just said yes, but Joshua uses a dramatic shift in tone to push back. He mirrors their enthusiasm with a heavy dose of reverse psychology. He actually says to them, "You are not able to serve the Lord. He is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your rebellion and your sins." It's incredible. He literally tells them that if they forsake God after all this good, God will turn and bring disaster upon them. Joshua is intentionally throwing ice-cold water on their quick, easy agreement. He desperately wants them to understand that this isn't just some casual contract. You can't just click agree to the terms of service without reading them first.
So the crucial point here really revolves around this specific term Joshua uses, a jealous God. Let's demystify this term in plain English, because honestly, it is absolutely crucial to understand. When we hear the word jealous today, we usually think of a petty, insecure human emotion, right? But in the context of this text, it means something entirely different. It simply means that God requires exclusive loyalty. It is a strict, unbending demand for absolute faithfulness to the covenant they are agreeing to. Think of it like marriage vows. A husband is rightfully jealous of his wife's affections, meaning he expects exclusive faithfulness. Joshua is warning them point blank, God will not tolerate divided loyalties. You cannot worship the Lord on the Sabbath and then go bow to the gods of the Amorites on Tuesday. It is all or nothing.
All right, let's move to Section 4, the Stone of Witness. Despite Joshua's stark warning, the people do not back down. In verse 21, they insist, "No, we will serve the Lord." Joshua tells them they are witnesses against themselves, and they agree. So Joshua officially makes a covenant with the people that day in Shechem. Let's walk through the clear, step-by-step process of how this agreement is officially ratified, as it's described in verses 25 and 26. First, the people verbally commit. We just saw that. They publicly state their allegiance despite the heavy warnings. Second, Joshua documents it. The text says he recorded these things in the book of the law of God. He sets it down as a binding statute and ordinance. And third, he creates a physical marker.
He takes a large stone and sets it up right under the oak tree near the holy place of the Lord at Shechem.
And what exactly is the purpose of this large stone? Well, verse 27 tells us. Joshua points to it and says to all the people, "See, this stone will be a witness against us. It has heard all the words the Lord has said to us. It will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God." He uses this beautiful poetic metaphor here. Obviously, a rock doesn't have ears, it can't literally hear, but Joshua is setting up a literal physical reminder right in their everyday environment. Whenever they walk past that oak tree in Shechem, they're going to see that massive stone. It stands there as a silent sentinel, symbolically holding the memory of the promise they just made. It listened to their binding oath, and it will stand as unyielding evidence against them if they ever dare to break it. And right after this, Joshua dismisses everyone to go back to their own inheritances.
Our text then moves to verses 29 and 30, bringing an end to a truly remarkable era. After all these events, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, dies. He is 110 years old. The text notes that they buried him in the land of his inheritance, at Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim. The great leader who brought them into the land finally rests in the very soil he helped secure. But the chapter actually doesn't end quite yet. Verses 31 through 33 tie up three final critical loose ends. First, we learn that Israel successfully served the Lord throughout the entire lifetime of Joshua and the elders who outlived him. Then, a centuries-old promise is kept. The bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had faithfully carried all the way out of Egypt, are finally buried right here at Shechem, in the exact tract of land Jacob had purchased. And finally, the chapter closes with the death of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the high priest, marking the definitive, final end of the Exodus generation.
This brings us to our final section, Section 5, Practical Life Lessons.
Okay, let's really dive into what we learned from this text. We've walked through the history and the narrative step by step, but how does this actually apply to our own self-improvement today? What are the simple, plain text takeaways from Joshua's final actions? Here are 4 straightforward life lessons we can draw directly from chapter 24. First, remember your history. Joshua knew that gratitude is fueled by memory. When we take the time to really remember where we came from and the help we've received along the way, those unearned blessings in our own lives, it keeps us grounded, humble, and highly focused. Second, commit completely without divided loyalties. Joshua demanded that the people put away their old idols. In our modern lives, we have to recognize what distractions or past habits are competing for our primary focus and intentionally remove them. Third, understand the gravity of your promises. Remember how Joshua used reverse psychology to ensure the people weren't just making an emotional, empty promise? When we commit to improving ourselves or serving a higher purpose, we must take that commitment incredibly seriously. It's not a casual thing. And fourth, create physical reminders. Just like that massive stone under the oak tree, we benefit immensely from tangible, visible cues in our everyday environment that remind us of our deepest commitments and goals.
Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. What stone of witness are you setting up today to ensure you keep your most important commitments? How are you actively holding yourself accountable to the choices you make? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.